Today, we are diving into the incredible story of one of history's most fascinating and formidable rulers, Catherine the Great.
Just think about that question for a second. It sounds like the plot of a movie, right? A total outsider, a German princess, somehow ends up as the most powerful woman in Russia. So how on earth did she pull it off? Let's get into it. Alright, so our story doesn't start in some grand Russian palace. Nope, it starts in Prussia, with a young girl who had big dreams, but not a whole lot else. So meet Princess Sophia. You'll notice her name isn't Catherine, not yet, and she definitely wasn't born Russian. Her family had a title, sure, but her dad was basically a minor prince with not much clout or cash. You could say the odds were seriously stacked against her from day one. But then an opportunity came knocking. A marriage proposal to the heir of the Russian throne. And Sophia didn't just take it, she went all in. As soon as she got to Russia, she threw herself into becoming Russian. We're talking late nights, practically freezing while she drilled the language. She converted to the Orthodox faith and took a new name, Catherine. She was absolutely playing the long game here.
And this quote, from her own writing, tells you everything you need to know about her. Even as a teenager, she had this incredible belief in herself, this idea that she, and she alone, was in charge of her own fate.
Her marriage was a complete disaster. Her husband, Peter, was childish, frankly kind of a jerk, and really unpopular, which left Catherine feeling pretty isolated. But she was smart. She used that time to give herself an education. She just devoured books by Enlightenment thinkers, learning everything she could about power, reason, and how to govern. It was basically a masterclass in how to be a ruler, long before she actually had the throne.
So all this quiet reading and planning, well, it was all building toward the single most dramatic moment of her life, a flat-out seizure of power.
So get this, just 6 months after becoming emperor, Catherine's husband had managed to tick off pretty much everyone who mattered. He made the military furious with his weirdly pro-Prussian policies. He alienated the powerful Orthodox Church. He basically created the perfect storm for a coup.
And Catherine? Oh, she was ready. When one of her allies was arrested, she didn't panic. She sprang into action. In one crazy whirlwind day, she got the elite imperial guards on her side, had the church declare her the sole ruler of Russia, and had her own husband arrested. The final move? Forcing him to sign a piece of paper, giving up his throne. It was fast, it was brilliant, and amazingly, it was bloodless. But there's a dark final twist to this part of the story. Just 8 days later, Peter was dead. Officially, they said it was a stroke, but nobody really believed that. His death, which was almost certainly an assassination, just so happened to remove the very last obstacle standing in Catherine's way.
So, with the crown firmly on her head, Catherine set her sights on something way, way bigger, turning Russia into a true global powerhouse.
The scale of her ambition was just off the charts. Over her reign, she expanded the Russian Empire by more than 500,000 square kilometers. To put that in perspective for you, that is an area larger than the entire country of Spain.
A huge part of this expansion was pushing south. After some major wins against the Ottoman Empire, she took over the Crimean Khanate. This was a massive deal because it finally gave Russia what it had wanted for centuries, a secure port on the warm waters of the Black Sea.
But her expansion wasn't just about winning wars. She was also an incredibly ruthless diplomat. She worked with her neighbors to orchestrate the partitions of Poland, where they literally just carved up the country between them, wiping Poland completely off the map for over 100 years.
Okay, and this is where Catherine's story gets really complicated, because on the one hand, she was this woman of culture and ideas, but on the other, she was an absolute monarch.
So you really have these two different Catherines. There's the enlightened monarch who wrote letters with philosophers like Voltaire, who started the first state-funded school for women, who poured money into arts and sciences, and then there's the autocrat, who made the brutal system of serfdom even stronger and who crushed anyone who dared to challenge her power.
You can see her ideals pretty clearly in projects like the Moscow Orphanage. She genuinely seemed to believe that with the right education, she could create a new kind of person and lift Russia up.
But here's the reality check. For the huge majority of people in her empire, life wasn't about philosophy and new schools. It was about grinding, back-breaking labor as a serf. And under Catherine, their lives actually got worse. Nobles were given even more power over them, including the right to just exile them to Siberia for pretty much any reason.
Well, that tension finally exploded into Pugachev's rebellion, the biggest peasant revolt in Russian history. It was a massive uprising, fueled by pure desperation. Catherine's response? Swift, brutal, and completely merciless. The whole thing absolutely terrified her, and it pretty much killed any ideas she ever had about freeing the serfs.
So after 34 years on the throne, what did she leave behind? What is her ultimate legacy? It's complicated.
Her legacy is just full of these contradictions. Yeah, she expanded the empire, but she also destroyed an entire nation to do it. She brought Western culture and ideas to Russia, but she did it by cementing her own absolute power. And while historians call it a golden age for the nobility, that age was built entirely on the suffering of millions of serfs. And in the end, her signature is almost the perfect symbol of her rule. This wasn't just about abstract policies. It was about the personal will of one incredibly determined woman, stamped onto an entire empire for more than 3 decades.
Look, she achieved her biggest goals, no question. She dragged Russia onto the world stage and made it a major European power. But that success came at a staggering human cost.
Which really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? Was she an enlightened ruler trapped by the time she lived in, or was she a ruthless tyrant who just used philosophy as a cover for her own ambition? And maybe the bigger question is, what does it really take for any leader to be called the great?